Hey folks, this is Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards, and today I'm going to bring you my top 5 favorite solo RPG options. Now, this is going to be TTRPG only. This is not going to include board games that try to emulate the RPG feel. If you want something along those lines, check out my top 5 D&D in a box game video. But without further ado, let's get into my top 5 solo RPGs.
Zombie Kill of the Week goes to Sister Cynthia Knickerbocker.
So here we have Scarlet Heroes. Scarlet Heroes is actually a lot of different products rolled into one book. It is a reimagining of BX Dungeons and Dragons. It is a retro clone, but it also has a distinct flavor for the solo hero play. So this can be played as a GM and one player using one character, and then there are also rules to emulate a GM in the back. So some of the pros of this one are the familiar ground. If you know BX, you're going to be very comfortable here immediately. You can also use any of the old OSR, BX, BECME, Redbox type materials with this very easily with almost no conversion other than the special rules that come along with the system. The Adventure Emulator, GM Emulator rather, is pretty simple. So it's easy to use. It's only a few pages. It's definitely not complicated like Mythic is, but it is. It pays homage to Mythic at the beginning of the emulator section and definitely takes inspiration from that. It has a relatively simple fix for playing one hero in adventures that are meant for multiple. So in the system that it uses, instead of having hit points, the monster's hit points are effectively their hit dice. But your damage is you roll your normal weapon die, and if you get a 1, you do no damage. If you get a 2 to a 5, you do 1 damage. If you get a 6 to 9, you do 2 damage. And if you get a 10 or more, you do 4 damage. Each damage that you do in this regard is a hit die, and it does overflow to other baddies. So if you've got 4 kobolds and you roll a 10 plus for damage, and they've got, let's say, 4 hit dice. I think kobolds are actually half a hit die, but you understand what I'm getting at. Let's say these are beefy kobolds, or one hit die apiece. Well, if you roll a 4 for damage, that kills all 4 of them. Another thing that Scarlet Heroes introduces to make the one hero against many work is going to be the fray die. Every hero gets a fray die, and that is basically to represent them being able to easily dispatch lesser enemies. So any enemy that has less hit dice than you have levels, you roll 1 fray die per turn as additional damage without rolling to hit or anything else. It represents minor spells and just incidental kicks and things. And just like before, if you roll a 1, 0 damage, 2 to 5, 1 damage, 6 to 9, 2 damage, and 10 plus 4 damage. And then you can take that many hit dice off the table with that as well. So those are the good things. The bad things are the emulators. I'm not a fan of emulators, so your miles may vary here. If you love emulators, this may be the right choice for you. I don't feel like it really captures much of the feel of an actual human GM. So I don't like that part. The fix for the one versus many, while it's very simple, it really doesn't always work. It makes some combats just way too fast, and kind of takes away some of the tension that came along with BX. which is really one of its strengths. And then the last thing I don't like about Scarlet Heroes is it's just kind of bland. The system itself, you could easily insert any of your retro clones, retro clones in here and use them and just take the emulator from it. But like I said, I'm not a big fan of the emulator, and I'm less of a fan of the conversion of BX that they did here. And here we have D100 Dungeon. Now this game by Martin Knight is going to be, I think it is probably the game out of this list that Gary Gygax would most endorse and enjoy. Because if you love detail, if you love number crunching, D100 Dungeon has you covered. The level of depth available in the character creation and the customization through the different items and equipment and magic and weapons and everything and armor, you can do armor piece by piece. It's all pretty amazing. The granularity that you get in statistics by going with a 100-point system rather than a 3 to 18 system is very helpful here. Everything is ruled by a base mechanic of rolling a D100 and trying to roll under a stat, similar to like your Chaosium Basic Cthulhu RuneQuest system. And anytime that you are going on a quest, you roll on a table to start the game, which determines what your quest is. And based upon that, it tells you what you need to do to successfully complete that quest. Some of them can be quite hard, but they do provide a really interesting emergent narrative just because of the level of detail. Every room has a number of rolls that you're going to make to create the experience. You're going to roll for the door. You're going to roll for the way that the room is built. You're going to roll for traps. You're going to roll for monsters. You're going to roll for natural features. It is going to create a very, very evocative experience. So that's the good part. The bad part is the bookkeeping is super heavy, as you might have expected by now. It almost feels like you are playing CPA, the role-playing game, like you're trying to get your character his own CPA designation. You're rolling for hit locations. You have to roll to see if the monster flees, and you can try to block the monster, and the monster can try to block you from fleeing. You have to keep track of your resources. You have to keep track of your oil to make sure you don't run out of lantern oil. You have to keep track of your food, and on and on and on. Another thing with that, if you spend so much time and you really take the time to get into the system and you spend 45 minutes creating a character, because of the nature of the swinginess of a D100 die roll, sometimes your character just dies from a choice that you really didn't make. It was just a couple of bad random rolls, and all of a sudden they're gone. Which that can happen in any OSR RPG experience, but this one seems especially bad in that regard. There's very little or no dice mitigation, and just feels like this is particularly harsh because of the amount of time it takes to build the character and go through the dungeon, to have it all end on such a meaningless occurrence. But that being said, if you like detail, if you like to feel like you can create anything possible, D100 Dungeon, especially with the Adventurer's Companion, gives you those options. And the emergent narrative that you can create with it is very strong. But if you want a game that is quick, or a game that is going to be a little bit more user-friendly, I would say this one may not be the one for you.
Don't let them catch you with your pants down. Rule number 3, beware of bathrooms.
And here we have the Mad Monks of Quantum. This is actually kind of a follow-up project. The original was The Ruins of the Undercity. And if you want a more fantasy-related version of this, then Ruins of the Undercity is very similar, just with a European fantasy style rather than the Asian mythology style. So, Mad Monks of Quantum is designed to be very hackable. It says it's a Labyrinth Lord compatible product, which is true. But you can also use basically any BX or retro clone and play with minimal or no conversion. I've played through this using Castles and Crusades. I've used Labyrinth Lord. I've used Swords and Wizardry. I've used BX. I've used BECME. So this one is very strong in that regards. I really like that you can use a familiar system. That makes it feel more like the experience I'm trying to get from a solo RPG, which is that nostalgia of playing back whenever I was a kid. Some of the pros of this, it includes a number of specialty classes for BX style Dungeons and Dragons. Now, they're a little bit tricky named because they're all different types of monks according to the game. But if you read through that, there's really like a Kinsai and a ninja, and there's like 4 or 5 different ones, and they definitely fill those stereotypical Dungeons and Dragons classes that were available in the original first edition Oriental Adventures book. So that was very cool. This has one of the slickest procedural dungeon generation systems that I've seen. It's not, basically because it's not a dungeon, it actually generates like rooms of a ruined temple. And so there's a lot of variety in it, and whenever you get done, if you're a good map maker, you'll have something that looks really cool when you're done with it. The town experience in Mad Monks of Quantum is actually quite good too. There's a lot of things that you can do in between adventures, which really gives you more of that full RPG experience. You're not just killing monsters, you're also going around and talking to shopkeepers and finding opportunities within the town. There's a special Watung monster manual that is actually based on artwork found on matchbooks from, I believe, the 1800s of monsters from, I think it was Asia, it was China, I believe, but if I'm wrong, you can correct me in the comments. But so those are the kind of the pros, but then the cons would be that it is really, from a gameplay standpoint, still mainly a procedural dungeon generator. There's really, beyond the town experience, you don't have much story at all other than trying to build a reputation for your character, which goes more back into the town experience. But it's not like creating that emergent narrative as much like a D100 Dungeon would. It can be pretty brutal. It doesn't take as long to create a character in BX as it does in like D100 Dungeon, but it can still be pretty frustrating sometimes. You get a character built up, you're really enjoying them, and then all of a sudden you get a series of bad dice, and there's just not much you can do about it. And then the last thing here is time. Like D100 Dungeon, this one takes a long time. You've really got to think out your choices. If you're mapping it, it's really going to take a while to properly do justice to the maps in this. and you're not going to be able to just sit down and play this on the fly. So, but overall, I really like Mad Monks of Quantum. I like the Ruins of the Undercity as well, but I like this one better, so that's the one I put on the list. But this is a very inexpensive way to utilize your retro clones or your BX materials as a solo RPG.
Rule number 2, Ziploc bags. You got enough problems. Moisture shouldn't be one of them.
Okay, now we're really getting into the meat and potatoes of what I like to play as a solo RPG. Forgan's Darkness is super quick to play and very fast to set up. Despite the fact that it's a simple system, there are a ton of results available from the D66 rolls. The options that you have for character creation, especially if you get some of the expansions, but even in the base game, you've got, I believe it is 8 character classes right off the bat. They're the BX classes plus the Barbarian. This game also has a very fun but simple combat mechanic to it. While it can be difficult, it is not brutal. The maps that you create with it are very quick to sketch out, but still, whenever you get done, if you enjoy that, you can really have a nice record of your game with the map. Some of the tools that come with the base game, if you get the PDF in particular, I have both the printed and the PDF. You get some booklets that have the tables in them, some little fold-up booklets for the different tables and also for the room generation. And then you also get like a flow chart that helps you kind of go through the procedural aspect of the game when you're going through corridors and rooms to see what happens. But the basis behind the game is that you are going through a dungeon looking for the final boss, and you're battling minions and vermin and weird monsters along the way and accumulating treasure. Now, if you get into the expansions, there are some preset stories that you can play through that are quite interesting. There's pirate stories and King Arthur stories and all sorts of things. And then also the same system has been used to create a Greek mythology version where you can play as children of the gods of Greek mythology, which is pretty neat. Haven't played that one. There's also 4 Against the Great Old Ones, and that is, as you might guess, a Cthulhu-based take on this, where they've changed up a lot of the dungeon crawling, because you don't really map anything out, but you travel around the world trying to solve a puzzle of what the cult is trying to bring back, which great old one. But for the base game, I would be satisfied with this for weeks and weeks on end with no expansion. It is a great way to spend some time and get that nostalgia back of playing Dungeons and Dragons back in the mid-'80s without having a group to get together, which is sometimes hard. The creator of this game had said that he knew his target market was going to be men in their 40s trying to generate that nostalgia feeling, and he nailed the mark for me. So some of the cons of this, and there's not many, you may not like it if you're not into the procedural dungeon thing, because that's basically what this is. And I know I held that as a mark against Mad Monks as well, but it doesn't feel as bad here because of the fact that this game is so simple and fast. I played my first game and I was done in probably 10 minutes because all of my equipment got stolen by gremlins the first room I walked into. I played my second game and I found the final boss in the third room I walked into and killed him. And so it can be that fast. An average game is supposed to be about 45 minutes, and that seems about right. But it can be a super fast game, and if you need to play something while you're traveling, or you don't have a lot of time, or you just don't want to spend a lot of mental energy getting into a complex game, Four Against Darkness is a great option. I would encourage anybody to pick up a copy of that.
Rule number 1 for surviving Zombieland: cardio.
And here is my favorite solo RPG. So Tunnels and Trolls is the second RPG ever created, and to my knowledge, it is the first soloable RPG. So the great things about the Tunnels and Trolls game for solo gamers is that it uses the same rule system as the full game. So you can play characters solo and then have those same characters play in your group games as well. It has a story. Some of these game books can be quite interesting, and they range from goofy to gritty. And there are a huge number of them available. They are very inexpensive, and they do have enough variety that you can replay them a few times and still be getting new experiences each time. They're definitely a little bit tough, but that is part of the fun. It is a quick setup. Basically, you have to roll up a character, which I did my first Tunnels and Trolls character roll up on a video. Took just 4 or 5 minutes, and it is definitely one solo game that has very few restrictions on what you can do in the solo versus the full game. So whenever you're creating your characters, you have a wide variety of, especially if you have the deluxe version, of weapons and armor and equipment and spells and kindred, which are what they consider ancestries or races. Meaning you have something like 50 or 60 different kindred to choose from. You can create pretty much any type of character you want, and that way it kind of feels similar to D100 Dungeon, but without some of the granularity. And you can do it fast, which is a nice upgrade from D100 Dungeon in that respect. The game books are tried and true. They're very proven in their quality, and there are a lot of them. So Tunnels and Trolls, definitely a game worth checking out for a solo gamer. You can buy the game books have a parsed down set of the rules in them. A lot of them do. The reprints of the Corgi editions usually have the rules inside of them, so you don't even have to get the full rules. I would still encourage you to get the full rules because they're worth a read, and also they give you some more options for the solo play. And it's a beautiful tome if you get it as well. Very well made and very nice art inside of it. The only thing I would say as a negative to Tunnels and Trolls from a solo gamer's experience is a lot of the adventures do not allow for magic. Some of them do, though, so it's not a total limitation. It's just you got to kind of pick and choose if you want to be able to be a spellcaster in the solo version of Tunnels and Trolls. Also, they do have a bit of the choose your own adventure going on. It's like choose your own adventure with a rule set overlaid on top of them. If you've played any of the Lone Wolf game books, kind of similar to that, but with more of an RPG feel to it. You get more skill checks and things like that, as well as the combat, which is really fast and fun. The combat is super simple, but very fun and fast. The other thing would be, if you only get 1 or 2 adventures, the replay value may not be there for you. You can pick up a procedural game like Four Against Darkness, and you could create near unlimited possibilities with that. Same thing with D100 Dungeon. Same thing with Mad Monks of Quantum. Whereas if you got just a game book, you wouldn't have as many options because there's not as much variety there. That being said, most of the game books actually have two different stories that you get to play through in them, and like I said, they're very cheap. So, my number one choice for solo RPG play is Tunnels and Trolls by Flying Buffalo Games. You can get it on their website, and you can pick up a lot of their stuff on the web. You can get it from eBay and Dragon's Trove and Noble Knight. Lots of different options there. So until next time, this has been Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards. Good gaming, and God bless.